And I was just kind of like putting stuff in there just to like, I don't know, like almost like not as a joke, but just kind of like, oh, I wonder if this would be cool or whatever. So a lot of the electronic stuff that I put in actually ended up staying on the record, either out of like we ran out of time or we just couldn't find anything that was better to replace it, you know. So yeah, when we got the demos in at that point in pre-production, it was kind of like a lot of re-recording. We were all posted up in our separate little booths, and we were doing like rehearsing the song and tracking at the same time.
Hello and welcome to the penultimate episode of The Record Process. This week, we're joined by Mike Cunniff, guitarist of the UK-based rock band Boston Manor. We sit down with Mike to break down the creation of the band's second full-length record, Welcome to the Neighbourhood, which was released in 2018 via Pure Noise Records. Mike expresses to us how he felt like this record was the band finally coming into their own and uncovering their unique sound. He shares how finding the right collaborators for a particular project are quintessential in bringing it to life. In this case, that collaborator was none other than legendary rock producer Mike Sapone. Sapone's experience working with some of the most influential bands from the Long Island punk and rock scene gave him the perspective needed to bring out the complex darkness and a sonic authenticity that Boston Manor had been searching for in its previous work, but had yet to be fully realized. We talk about the gear necessary to create this Boston Manor sound and what it was like going abroad to record at the legendary Barbershop studios. And it's all coming up right now. The task of making a great album is rarely a solo endeavor, and companies like Audio Movers help empower musicians and creators by streamlining their workflow together and enabling them to make more efficient and informed creative choices. Famous for their groundbreaking collaborative plugin tool, Listen To, Audio Movers have made it possible to stream audio files in real time directly from your DAW to anyone, anywhere in the world. And recently, Audio Movers have expanded their dynamic plugin suite with Inject, an impressive audio routing solution that allows users to route audio in and out of any channel in your DAW. And alongside Inject stands the newly updated Omnibus 2.0, a software application that turns your Mac into a virtual patch bay, making it possible to route audio between applications and hardware seamlessly. And you can get 25% off Inject and Omnibus right now by heading to audiomovers.com and entering the code RECORDPRO at checkout. With over 1 million plus artists already relying on DistroKid to get their music into Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all the major streaming platforms, you may have heard of it before. But if you're not yet familiar with just how easy DistroKid makes unlimited uploads and retaining 100% of your artist royalties and earnings, now is the time to finally see for yourself. And that's because they've just supercharged the functionality of their platform with the recent release of their new iOS app. The app allows you to upload new releases, check your streaming stats from Spotify and Apple, edit release metadata, and you can even set push notifications that will alert you every time you've earned royalties that you can withdraw right from the app. In addition to getting your music uploaded to DSPs faster than any competitor, DistroKid also has a ton of great promotional tools that can help you market your music better. You can view and share hyperfollow links and allow fans to pre-save your songs in advance, get the credits and lyrics for your songs instantly uploaded, and you can do all this for just $22.99 a year. So head to the App Store and download the DistroKid app for free now. Mike Cunniff of Boston Manor fame. Buddy, we are happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us, man. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited about this one.
Cheers. Of course, you guys, full disclosure, we've spent some time together in a couple parts around the world over the years, but it has been a while, a pandemic and then some, if you will. And we were just joking a little bit before I pressed this big old record button here about how taking a walk back through those old records, and specifically the one that we wanted to talk about with you today, Welcome to the Neighborhood. It's always interesting to kind of go back, and even though you play so many of the songs so often night after night, kind of re-immersing yourself in the recording and how it came out, and even maybe looking at some photos, has a lot of memories rushing back, and really interestingly so, because obviously as musicians we evolve, right? And the band evolves. Y'all have done a lot since then. But we wanted to take a trip down memory lane because that was a really big record for you guys, huh?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like, I guess, like the first time that we felt completely comfortable in our own skin. And it felt super exciting and natural to actually, I kind of feel like because we kind of came up in the pop punk world with, like, you know, Pure Noise Records and a lot of those kind of bands, doing a lot of those kind of style tours. It was strange how we were kind of just like drawn to, I guess, like the music that we grew up listening to a little bit more, and we just kind of wanted to follow our hearts a little bit more on this record, and just kind of like not really think about what everyone else was doing at the time, and just make a record that we were super proud of, and we could get up every single day on stage and just feel completely comfortable playing those songs, you know, and true to ourselves. So it was really exciting. It almost felt like we were writing our first record.
Yeah, dude, that's so brilliant. And there is just this really unabashed authenticity to these songs and the sonics behind them, right? And then obviously, like, lyrically, there's some real deep honesty across the board on this. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about, you know, what set the stage, obviously, like with the previous full length here, because context is always, I find, really important, you know, from record to record, and as the lineage of your band and the way it evolves kind of rolls out. Talk to me about how you did the LP1 and the stuff before it. You worked with a producer by the name of Neil Kennedy on the previous LP before Neighbourhood, right?
That's correct. Yeah. We recorded down at the Ranch Studios, and we recorded an EP called Saudade and Be Nothing with Neil Kennedy. And it was kind of, you know, when you just kind of like, this is all like our first real band. So we were kind of like always, and we still are, like, for the most part, figuring stuff out along the way. And it was almost like not much planning really went into it, or that much thought. It was just kind of like, well, we've written this amount of songs, and these are the songs that we're going to take to the studio to record, you know. And you know, it's kind of weird because that record is so far removed from especially the stuff that we're doing now, but it really, like, touched a lot of people. Like, we know a lot of people that still want us to play the older stuff, still really cherish that record, and it's really important for them. And I think that's kind of like, that's what we aspired to be at the time, you know, because when we started the band, a lot of the bands that we saw around at the time had those records, you know, like Tiger's Jaw had the Pizza record, you know, and like Citizen Youth and stuff like that. And a lot of people still love those records today. And we just wanted to make, like, I guess, like a very, I guess, like, just like a rock record that people would still love and cherish, you know. And it's fairly simplistic as well, you know. There's nothing like crazy going on sonically. I think everything was just really well recorded. We were able to tour off that record for like 2 years, so it served us well, and we still play some of those songs today. It's a little bit strange trying to figure out where they fit in the set, but I'm sure you've had a massive transformation.
That life well. Yes, indeed. Yes, there's always the 7-inch collective out there that wants the deepest, dullest, oldest B-side or rarity from you. I do know that well, but I think what's cool and important about what you're saying there, Mike, is especially in the way that role plays. Even though you guys have come very far sonically, melodically, all of those things, just like us with Wonder Years. But you don't get there without kind of going through those first. They're all a part of the story, you know. And the hope is that, you know, even fans of your band that do love that and have that attachment to it understand that too, you know, and say, hey, the band has evolved. I can still love the first iteration of it and this new iteration of it, but you need the first one to get to the second, you know, to figure those things out about yourselves. And that's kind of what I love. So that's, like I mentioned, that's some really great context and why I wanted to go back, because this record, you know, you put that out and you toured off of that first LP a lot. So talk to me about that time period that kind of brought you into turning the focus to the next project at hand, to the next full length, to that sophomore, you know, release, and where you were going to go. And, you know, because once you get on the road, it's like you have a lot less time and things are kind of swept up. Pure Noise is pushing that hard, you know, the dynamic changes and your schedule changes. So what was that period like when people started saying, hey, so what about this next record?
You are absolutely right. As soon as I think when that album came out, Be Nothing, we were actually on our first ever US tour. It was like, it wasn't a real US tour. It was like a little bit of the Midwest, the Northeast, and predominantly Canada. So we did like our first time over in North America was like, we were doing places like Saskatoon and Calgary and Winnipeg, along with like a bunch of other, you know, like US places. And it was really amazing. Not many bands, I guess, get to do that. But from that tour onwards, we were just constantly busy. The next year we did our first proper full US tour in March and April. A couple of months later, we were on Warped Tour, like the second to last Warped Tour. And we had to, we had to kind of fit writing in amongst all of that. And we actually did, it's probably something that I would never do now because of just how frustrating and tricky it is. But we did quite a bit of the writing on the road as well, just because we had to. But yeah, it was weird because I think maybe those years of touring really shaped. It's strange because I feel like the record Welcome to the Neighbourhood is predominantly about where we're from, and I think it was the outside perspective of the world that really shaped that record and kind of, I guess, like allowed us to compare our hometown and to see differences and similarities between, you know, especially places in the US as well. Because I think only a couple of us had only been over there for like a brief amount of time. So we really got to see the country properly, you know. So yeah, it was just a lot of figuring out the record whilst we were traveling on the road. And it was honestly like such a blissful process. Like we were all really excited. We were writing different things. I think the main turning point for us sonically, it's going to sound a little bit silly, but we got asked to do one of those Pop Goes Punk cover, you know, like those covers for the albums. And we got to do 21 Pilots Heathens. And we were just like, why don't we just like really fuck this up? We just wanted to do our own style cover of that song. And we really wanted to like do a 180 on it, make it really just insane and really heavy. And I just, I was experimenting a lot with my chorus pedal that I'm looking lovingly at right now that I've had since we started the band.
Ooh, which one? Talk to us about it.
It's just a Boss super chorus. I've started trying to use only Boss stuff because a lot of my favorite artists use it. It's cheap, it lasts, and yeah. But it's just a super chorus. But like, I just started turning, I guess, like everything up to full, and it just made this like really crazy wobbly sound. And I was like, oh, that kind of sounds like a lot of the bands that I grew up listening to in the nu metal era, like Korn and Limp Bizkit and stuff like that. So I was just like, what if I just sneak this in? Like, what if I just like start using this in some of the songs? And it kind of became like a little bit of a, I guess, like a signature for Welcome to the Neighbourhood. I tried to use it on as many songs as I could that way. And I just like it. It's just kind of ballsy. It's kind of like maybe something that people in the scene had never heard before. And I'm all about doing stuff like that. You know, I'm always trying to, I guess, like push the sonics in a way where I guess like I want to excite myself as well. I just want to try and make music that I don't think people have heard before, or a good version of what might have been done before, but it kind of didn't work out,
Right.
So yeah, that doing that cover kind of really helped us maybe establish a little bit of the sound that would be Welcome to the Neighborhood.
Oh man,
amazing!
I love that so much.
Yeah, Mike. So I just want to touch on one thing. So like while writing on the road, what was that like? Was it a lot of was it everyone like writing during sound check? Or was it like writing on the bus in the back room in isolation? And was that aspect a different factor of writing this record from like writing the EP and LP that came before?
Yeah, miles. It was nuts. Like I would totally never do it again. It was a real pain in the ass. And I've actually got some of the photos I dug out. There's so for the first time we had a bandwagon for Warped Tour, and we were trying to set up our laptops, and we were renting 2 of our bunks out to 2 other people on the tour that became very good friends of ours. And there was always people in and out. You can't get into a good rhythm. And there's a picture of Ash. I think he's got his head like on one of the benches or one of the sofas or whatever, and his legs down, and he's acting like a table. And I just kind of like jokingly set up my laptop on there with the audio interface, but it's just silly things like that. And I remember trying to set up the laptop on my bunk, and then I'd have like Carmen would come in and she'd need something from her bunk, which was above mine. She'd start climbing all over me, and I've got my guitar. Or if the bandwagon starts moving and you just kind of like, well, maybe it adds to the riff.
Oh, it's over once those bandwagons are in motion. You're not doing anything productive.
Have you tried to take a shower whilst it's moving?
I have, and it was maybe one of the most regrettable decisions. And you're talking to a man that's like done like 9-hour drives in a trailer from like Denver to Salt Lake and shit like that. And still the stand-up like bandwagon shower is an actual like Russian roulette gamble.
It's harrowing.
Truthfully. Yeah. No. So that's why, and that's actually a perfect example of the literal physical and spatial challenges of trying to write on the road, right? And that's why that's a great point, Tom. And I'm excited to see that picture because I can imagine, and we've had so much time trying to not even right, but it's like in the bandwagon, there's one table, and if it's full and Warped Tour is crazy and chaotic, people are in and out constantly, right? So even just like, I'm sure by halfway through that tour, y'all were like, I'm not setting the interface up. I can't even, and so that's but it's interesting. It's like, so it really takes, it's a lot less than being at home and just being like, okay, my things are set up. All I have to do is pick up the guitar and double click on Logic or double click on what, and then I'm off and running.
Even then it can get tricky. Yeah. Even
then,
at home,
exactly.
you like, oh, I don't have any ideas today. That is brilliant.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I would have to imagine that like anything that you are writing that you're putting down to, in this case, hard disk, whatever you're putting down has to excite the fuck out of you and like stimulate you that much more because there's so many other stimulants going on. The literal bandwagon, you're feeling like you're going to fall off the face of the earth, or there's like so many people. I mean, like it might be a double-edged sword. It might like be that refining element of like, oh, I need to super focus on this and it needs to capture my full attention. So it's super interesting, and I love that that's where this started.
Yeah. Mike, do you remember any specific ideas or in that time period, maybe like, well, you guys were on Warped or on that bandwagon that you were like, this is this riff, or you recall like fighting through all that and, this song came out of it, do you have any distinct, obviously a bunch of ideas were probably put down, but
I think, to be honest with you, I think I remember getting home and looking at the folder, scrolling through the ideas, and literally hitting delete. I think there was like maybe 2 songs. I think there were 2 songs that I'd already done prior to Warped Tour. I'd already had like a bassist down for Halo and Bad Machine. And Bad Machine was the working title of the song that kind of just stuck. I think Halo was as well, actually. I'm not sure, but those, I think Henry managed to do some vocals to those on the road, but everything I was doing, honestly, I got home, I listened to it, and it was sad. it was really sad. It was like I don't know if you've seen the Some Kind of Monster Metallica documentary, but it was there's a you've seen the I would delete that moment with Lars's dad. It was that kind of moment where I was looking through that, and it's funny because like it is nice to kind of like cleanse yourself of that, and I feel like all of those failures that you make as a songwriter or an artist is another step closer to what you're making or what you're trying to make. So even though it can get you down a little bit, I always see those as necessary steps and processes to getting to what you're trying to actually do. So even though I probably wasted quite a lot of my time trying to write on the road, it did help figure out certain things and certain problems that I was having with the songwriting process. So it was good.
Yeah, I think, and dude, that's such a great point. Having the clarity and the courage to go ahead and say, I'm scrapping this all, right? I like, even though this is me, I can also just vote myself out of here because it's not good enough, but in a productive way to move forward. And like, I think what you're saying is you're walking through those steps and you're making all those mistakes, but just because you spent the time, I think a lot of creatives, probably suffer with that time scarcity and sunk cost kind of thing, where it's like, well, I've spent so much time on it. I got to make it good. I got to make it work, And then sometimes it's, if you're trying to solve a problem, it's like, it becomes a round peg, square hole thing where it's just like, maybe it's just the fact that like the song isn't meant to be on this record. You know what I mean? Like that's really the honesty and the light of that when you see it in the light of day. And I think what's interesting too is writing on tour, coming back home, and kind of reevaluating it as opposed to like writing in the studio real quick and then straight up put it down to tape and now it's there forever. That's a part of it. There's a difference in there, and there's a clarifying element in that time period. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. I love that you're just like, hey, don't be afraid to, just because you spent all that time on it, don't be afraid to say, this isn't what I want to make right now. And that's okay. Yeah. You had to do that. You had to get there through those steps. Mm-hmm. Dude, that's amazing. So you spent that time on the road writing, throughout that whole kind of cycle. Right. And at what point, because you had worked with Neil on the previous stuff, at what point in the conversation was it, whether Jake at Pure Noise or yourselves, as a band, when did you start discussing who you wanted to do this next record with? And, where did the infamous Mike Sapone come into that conversation? I'm curious.
It's a really funny one. He was just like our dream producer, my dream producer. I loved every record that he's done. I think he's done some amazing stuff. And we kind of just put it to our management that we just said, we want to work with this producer. Almost like that's never going to happen because of, he's very secretive, very mysterious, and you don't know if you're going to be accepted into this circle. And she came back and she said, yeah, he wants to set up a call with you. And honestly, it was, especially that moment, I couldn't believe it. None of us could, and we didn't know what to expect either. And we finally jumped on a call with him, and he really wasn't what we expected at all. He's like such an easygoing, happy-go-lucky, really, really sweet, just like, I don't know, just a regular guy that loves movies, loves going out to eat and stuff like that. And I don't know, it was a little bit like kind of caught us off balance a little bit. We're just like, is this the guy that made these like crazy records? He's just like, this is sick. And I guess like when you're a young band as well, and you only really hear about these people and you're not really connected to the network and stuff, I guess like maybe in your own head, you kind of build up this whole like, I don't know, like all of these myths and all of this, like all of this stuff about this one person. And yeah, it just turns out, yeah, he really wanted to work with us. He was really excited. We found a lot of, I guess like common ground in the music that we liked as well. So yeah, we booked in with him for pre-production in September that year, 2017.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you remember, just because those producer calls, right? And I'm sure at this point, y'all have been on a number of them, just like we have, every record, like considering like where to go, what the songs are going to be like and things like that. Do you remember anything? Again, you say that it's kind of stuck out that he wasn't what you were expecting. And I think sometimes, again, the body of work creates this like lore and mystique of what you as kids, and us like as musicians, guitar players listening to these incredible rock records that are larger than life, right? You have maybe a conceived image in your head. Do you remember what specifically that music conversation was like, that there were anything that you surprised him that he maybe threw out there, or some examples that y'all connected on? Because I think for me, what's always struck me about the band and this record specifically is, you say, leaning into a lot of those old school like rock and nu metal records that y'all came up with. Did he have any examples, or what do you remember from that call too, other than that, like specifically those connection points, musically speaking, I guess?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was kind of, we didn't talk too much, I guess, like about other bands, but yeah, I guess because of the records that he'd done at the time, you think, I guess, like maybe his tastes are more like, I guess, like indie leaning, that kind of style, or like, I guess, like the emo world and that. But yeah, like he was all about like, getting a really aggressive like drum and guitar sound. We talked a lot about Nine Inch Nails and how a lot of the stuff sounds like a little DI'd and a little bit like loose and messed up. And that was really appealing to us at the time as well. Because even though I guess we came up with through the pop punk scene, we always, before then, we always did mini tours and like one-off shows with like bands in the punk world, and we kind of adopted that ethos in the way that we play, the way that we present ourselves, and the community vibe. So we wanted to keep that, and we wanted to keep like the looseness of what we were doing, but to combine it almost with like a little bit more of a polished sound, if that makes sense, like what every artist is trying to do in a way, and yeah, he fit the mold completely, We geeked out about movies a lot. He's a very big Kubrick fan, that I'm sure everybody knows probably by now. We actually went to the cinema with him a couple of times, go out to eat with him a lot, and he's very much a family man as well, and we really bonded. He was like our cool uncle that had like really sick taste in music,
Hell yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so you booked the time, right, with him once you knew he was your guy. So this is where it starts to get interesting too, because he is not located in the UK. He is much further from you than your previous recording counterparts, right? And this enters a studio that we've spoken about, that Tom and I are very familiar with, and a lot of interesting records have been cut. He chose to do this record with y'all out of a studio called the Barber Shop in lovely Hopatcong, New Jersey, which is North Jersey, which is a very interesting place. So talk to me about what the first impressions were when you got over there to start doing this record.
Mike, was this your first time in Upper New Jersey? Like outside of like touring, like spending time?
Yeah.
Cool.
Lovely.
Cool.
And it was eye-opening.
What a lovely way to say that.
You know what? Like as a British person as well, it's like my girlfriend is from the States, and it's funny because like everything, even where I live around here, it's like it's super boring. There's nothing really going on, but she finds so many things amazing all the time, because it's just so different. And I guess like we felt that way when we arrived at Hopatcong. We were walking around like, oh man, this is so cool. There's a lake. There's like all of these trees and stuff. It feels like I'm in Twin Peaks or something, and it's all misty and foggy and mysterious. And then there's like these crazy local people and stuff that will just kind of stop and talk to you for no reason. Yeah, it was, and the studio itself, as you know, is a converted church with a restaurant attached to it. And I'm sure like, you said you interviewed someone from Hot Mulligan, right?
Yes. Yeah, we had them on last season.
Did they stay in the band pad or the band pad?
Oh, the crash pad.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The crash pad came up. Yes. But I'd love your take on it, if you would care to elaborate further.
Okay. Well, our experience, it might have been the same, might have been very different, but it's obviously above a restaurant, so it feels greasy and it always smells really bad up there. Which is strange because like obviously the food's really nice, but the the amalgamation of all of the different foods that they're cooking below is just up there, and it's dreadful. Like you can almost like cut the air with a knife. I was sleeping. I've got more pictures as well, actually, that I'll send to you after this, if you want to include them in this. But I took the little sofa bed. I remember the first time I got into bed, I looked up and I just saw probably about 50 to 100 spiders just above me, just like, and just when you're like, oh, this is my home for like the next couple of weeks, you're just like, need to do something about those spiders, maybe, maybe just try not to think about them. But yeah, like it was a cozy little pad. Like it was cool. It was free to stay there as well. We didn't have to get an Airbnb, and we're always about that. We're always about saving money. We've slept in, we've done DIY tours for as long as we can remember, and like that wasn't anything new to us. But the spiders, though, like I've never seen that many spiders before in my life. And we used to say to each other every evening and every morning, "Spiders be with you." I don't know why, just like as almost like a greeting. But yeah, no, it was cool. I think the second time we stayed there, I think one of the windows was broken or something. It was in like, because when we came back, that was for pre-production. We came back in like February when there's this horrific, crazy snowstorm, which was really cool. Yeah. Really, really cool. But one of the windows was broken. I think their answer to that was just like, oh, just like patch it up with some plastic bags or something. So my spot on the sofa was right next to that broken window as well. That was like kind of just like taped up with like plastic bags and stuff. It was awesome, man. It's character building stuff, It's really hard to complain after you stay in places like that,
Yeah. And I think, and what's interesting too, and now that you mentioned that snowstorm, I think that's actually when y'all were actually tracking, when I happened to be up there, and the first time I met you guys in the lounge, like milling around one morning, because I was there cutting stuff with another band. And yes. I think that was actually, this is before we had like toured together or anything like that. I had just heard of the band name as like, hey, this is, this Pure Noise band. And I was like, oh, they're lovely fellows. What are y'all doing? And they're like, we're working with Mike. And I was like, Sapone? Yeah. I was like, how's it? And I think I was like a little cheeky. I was like, how's it going? Let me get some ears on this. I think it might've been very early on in it, but yeah. And then I had to drive like back like 2.5 hours to Philly through that snowstorm, I think, that you're talking about. So it was, yeah, it's, boy, it's like that studio is kind of remote to begin with. But when you're snowed in, it really feels like some like Shining-esque shit. Like there is nothing around. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I think Tades did bring up the spiders.
I think they also mentioned it. Yeah. I don't know. They might have been different spiders, but
Hey man, generational spiders.
Generational spiders. That's right.
Generational spiders. I love that. And I love that the spiders are a permanent fixture in the abode. It's almost like if I stayed there now when there weren't spiders, maybe I'll be a bit upset,
Or should another band be listening to this and be really excited to have their own interaction and time with said spiders and not get that, they would feel shortchanged, So I would hate for that to be the case.
Wait. They wouldn't have a leg up on the competition.
Nice.
Deanna, we're going to need you to edit that. We're going to need you to edit that out. Tom gives himself his own, sad trombones himself. I love that. As music fans, we know that the records we love are more than just something we listen to, right? Over time, they become a part of us and a part of our identity, and nobody knows this better than the people at Rockabilia, the best online shop for band merch, hands down. For more than 30 years, Rockabilia has offered the largest selection of officially licensed music merchandise available around the world. They do it all, from authentic concert t-shirts to band hoodies and posters, and even accessories from your favorite iconic artists. They do hats, backpacks, bags, pins, belts, you name it, they have it, as well as exclusive access to limited edition designs that you can only get through them and the artists that they partner with. Maybe you missed the merch table at a recent show and you're looking to treat yourself. Maybe you're looking to treat somebody else in your life with a gift card. Or maybe you're looking to outfit the children in your life with some new gear, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Yes, they even have accessories for your pets. They have it all, so just head over to rockabilia.com or follow the link in our show notes, and for a limited time, all Record Process listeners can receive 10% off their order just by entering the code ROCKRECORD. That's all one word, ROCKRECORD, at checkout. So we are extremely proud to have the people at Oxford Pennant as an official sponsor of the Record Process again here on Season 5. And I'm here to tell you about their new pennant and flag customizer. It's real simple. All you have to do is head to oxfordpennant.com to make your own custom flag on demand. Simply type in your favorite phrase, inside joke, lyric, whatever you want, approve the preview, and Oxford will print, sew, and ship your flag straight to you from their beautiful headquarters in sunny Buffalo, New York. Creating and ordering your own custom flags from Oxford Pennant is actually so easy and affordable now that I'm concerned I'll have to start paying off my co-host Tom just to prevent him from putting every dumb thing I say this season on a flag. Seriously, I wouldn't put it past him. But with great power comes great responsibility, as we know, and that's exactly what Oxford Pennant is giving you here. All you have to do is head to oxfordpennant.com, search Customizer, and let the designing begin. Let's talk about the demos that you brought in, the songs. You mentioned that you did pre-pro there, right? Beforehand.
Correct.
And then you came back to track it. Let's start with the pre-pro process and what you remember from that, because sometimes, you know, you mentioned this was a record where sonically you were turning everything on that chorus pedal up to 11, starting to get, you know, real deep in a bit more of, you know, chasing that kind of sonic tone and color and those ideas. What do you remember, like, what stage were the demos that you brought in to pre-pro with Mike? And do you remember anything changing or really clicking in that period initially?
Yeah, like we like to get our demos to a point where we're super happy. Like we like to get them to a point where it's like 85 to 90% almost like done, because we feel a lot more comfortable in the studio. We have a lot more time in the studio to be more creative as well when the meat and potatoes are down, you know. But the like a lot of the demos I was doing, because I didn't know how to use any like music software or anything like that. So it was the first time for me where I bought Logic, and it was $150, and I was just like, if I'm spending this much money, I better learn how to use it. So I was all wrapped up in that, and it was really exciting to have like all of these tools presented to me, especially like stuff like MIDI and that, and I bought an audio interface, and I started like recording things myself, whereas normally me and my brother Dan would record together. He went to university and studied all of that. He's very good. It's weird because like I was also, because I was discovering this new software, and I was like, what do you mean I can just put some synth in this? And I was just kind of like putting stuff in there just to like, I don't know, like almost like not as a joke, but just kind of like, oh, I wonder if this would be cool or whatever. So a lot of the electronic stuff that I put in actually ended up staying on the record, either out of like we ran out of time or we just couldn't find anything that was better to replace it, you know? So yeah, when we got the demos in at that point in pre-production, it was kind of like a lot of re-recording. We were all posted up in our separate little booths, and we were doing like rehearsing the song and tracking at the same time, which I'm not sure if that really works very well for us. I don't think we've tried that a couple of times in the studio. It feels a little bit awkward. We're kind of like more of a laptop band, and we like to kind of like do stuff bit by bit. But yeah, we were just trying new things. It was really exciting, and we came away with about 5 or 6 demos for us to take home. And I think that's really important. That's the best thing about pre-production that I think people kind of undervalue sometimes, is you get a chance to sit with those songs for a bit and really listen to them and really think about it. And I think that's kind of invaluable in the process. You know, I think that's really important because then like you said as well, you're listening to stuff in the cold light of day. After the buzz of recording has died down and the excitement, you're left with these 5 or 6 songs. And then that's when I think the truth kind of reveals itself, whether they are what you want to make, whether they're actually good, whether there's something in there, or whether you just need to delete that.
Hit the delete all.
Yeah.
And save. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was great.
There was how much time was there between those pre-pro sessions and you going back to track the record again?
It's really sad, but like I've had 2 birthdays in that studio, and the first one was during September. That was our pre-pro session, and then we came back in February, March to record the album, and we came back with even more songs. So we managed to do a little bit of pre-production before we actually started recording as well. And we had one song that we'd written during the pre-pro sessions in the studio on a day off, actually, because what else are you going to do in Hapatcong, you know?
Right.
So yeah, we kind of had the album almost in 2 halves. And yeah, we had a couple of months just to kind of like mull it over, and it became very apparent what was suitable for the record and what was not, you know?
Yeah. What was the song that you wrote while you were in the studio?
It was the last track on the album, The Day I Ruined Your Life.
Really?
Yeah.
And it came together in a day, just from scratch?
Yeah. It was something we wanted to write like it's really weird. Like it kind of doesn't fit on the album in my opinion, but it's a really nice closer, I think, for the album. We just wanted to write like a kind of like a cyclic Radiohead song. And we didn't actually intend for it to go a little bit more shoegazy and to go big at the end, but it just kind of ended up happening. I think it's a really kind of like nice way to kind of like to end the album. Like it kind of starts electronic and then ends on a more natural acoustic guitar level, you know, and a rock band. And I really kind of like that progression. So yeah, and the fact that we'd written it in the studio, the lyrics were extremely personable on that song, to the point where I don't think we'll ever perform it live. So it had to go on the record. You know, it was a very nice moment for us all to be so collaborative in that space. And I'm glad it made the cut as well.
Yeah. Was that the first time that you wrote a song like that in the studio while making a record, or had you done that previously, or had they always been songs that were prepared or at least somewhat fleshed out going into the studio? It
was the first time that we'd ever done that. We're kind of control freaky. We want everything done our way, and we want everything fleshed out before we get to the studio for the most part. But we've been lately, you know, we've been leaving a lot of leeway for I guess like room for the songs to grow in the studio now, you know. But at the time we were just really, really terrified, especially paying all of that money to go over to the US and then not having a finished record at the end of it is pretty bad, right. You know. So we just made sure that we were completely and very well prepared for these sessions.
Now, with that song in particular, was there anything within the studio that caused the song to come out like it did? Like anything at all, like lights that were like wonky that like made your head trip, so like you were like, oh, I need to play this rhythm, or like a weird sound that like stirred the cause of like this song.
I think it was the spiders. I think the spiders the spiders were in our dreams and in our brains. I think it might have been the spiders, but
all roads lead back to the spiders.
I think there were a few things that had happened to us, some of us personally, but I guess, you know, it's not really, I guess, like something that I really want to talk about. I don't know, you know.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Well, so as you go in, right? So you're knee deep in the record making process. And you mentioned, I think it's interesting too, you know, you set the stage of kind of doing that pre-pro, everybody's playing your like full like live band, you know, tracking stuff through. And you mentioned that you've come now to find that y'all like to function a little bit more kind of like one step at a time. You mentioned like the, you know, kind of the phrase like a laptop band, but I think that's interesting in that, you know, that kind of presents, you know, a workflow that in this case, you know, these are really big rock songs, and they're songs that I've watched y'all play live and feel incredible live, right? Regardless of any additional, extra production. But that was so crucial to this song because these songs have such depth to them. So you mentioned the beloved Boss chorus pedal that kind of was a bit of the catalyst for this new era in a way for you. But let's talk about what did you end up having time to do some of that experimentation there from like a knob turning standpoint? Because I'm curious because Mike has made so many rock records like that, and this was y'all really starting to embrace a lot of what had influenced you. Where did that experimentation take you? Do you remember anything, like any specific sounds or moments that you really felt like you had the time to try and take a swing at something there in the studio?
Yeah, I think having the option of the amount of equipment that is in there, I think it's almost like option paralysis though. You can. It was really hard. Like there's a picture that I was trying to get hold of just literally pedals stacked on pedals, and there's like a self-playing piano in the other room and a bunch of synths. Like Mike Sapone actually brought a lot of stuff from his own personal studio to use on the record as well. Like there was I think he was bringing stuff every day that he came down. So there was like 3 or 4 carloads of stuff to play around with. And it's really, he was giving us these little, what are they called? Like pocket something.
The pocket operators?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
Pocket operator. Yeah. Yeah. He was kind of giving us those to play with as well. And he was just like, just see if you can come up with like a loop or something like that. There was all kinds of really strange little toys that we'd never had access to before. And it was really cool. At the point where I'm at now, I try to have the things that I really like. I like to think, I guess, like maybe like I'll go to work with a toolbox with a select amount of tools for a particular album. I think it kind of stops the option paralysis kind of thing. I think it forces you to use the few things that you have extremely well. And it really helps. There's a saying that I really like. It's think outside of the box, right? Which is, everyone said it, but this guy said, why don't you think inside the box? And it's his thing is that you create parameters and restraints creatively, and that is what is going to force you to do something different or something outside of your comfort zone. He says, think inside the box, think inside restraints, set up parameters for you to work within. And it sometimes forces you to do something that you wouldn't normally do. And I like to do that with the equipment as well. I think it's really interesting to use something in a way where it's not intended to be used that way. And if that means like, I don't know, DIing a metal zone pedal or something, or turning all of the knobs on your chorus pedal to full, anything like that, I think is really interesting.
I love that. Dude, that's brilliant. And so it's actually, interestingly enough, kind of reminds me of the philosophy that I think like a lot of creatives can borrow from it, like Stoic ideologies, which is this kind of like obstacle becomes the way type scenario, right? Where you're just like, creativity is really just like you're solving problems in there in the studio in its own way. And sometimes the problem is, how do we get from this section to this section? And then sometimes the problem is, why doesn't this sound interesting enough, and how do you solve it? Or why isn't this doing what I want the part to do to me? And those are the problems that you solve. And sometimes, like you mentioned, if you give yourself, that direction and those parameters, they can almost serve as little obstacles where you're like, I can only use this. It's like, well, how can I flip that on its end to do something interesting, or to make a new solution? I love that, actually, because otherwise you could sit there for, how many of us have, the time and space to tinker with every key and every tool and every setting it has, but if you only have 1 or 2, you're going to explore the full depth of what they can do and what they're meant to do and what they're not meant to do, and what happens when you push those things to the limit. I think that's where we get some really interesting things. And I feel that as you said it on this record, I was like, you can feel that it's not just 1,000 things thrown together, that it's like, how can I like turn all of these knobs and find this really weird setting and this really interesting character to put behind it, that makes the song feel correct and feel intentioned, but in a different way. And I love that. So think inside the box, Tom. We're thinking inside the box now. Forget outside the box.
Yeah. I think, Case, you just brought up a really important thing is like intention. And so like with so many options, your intention gets muddled. Whereas like you have four or five pedals on your board, let's go. Your intention has to be there. Like you have to be committing to that part. So I love that. So like you're tracking with Sapone, you guys are doing some very creative stuff. Now, so you get done tracking, record's done. What happens during mix stage? Did y'all stay in the US for mix? Did Mike mix? Like talk to us about that process, because as much as tracking is a creative process, mixing, especially like an album like this, has to be such a creative process. And like sometimes with such distance between, if you're not there, it creates some unique things to come up. So like walk us through that.
Absolutely, yeah, fully agree with you. Like a mix can make or break an album for sure. Whilst I was there, I was actually reading those little, I think they're called like 33 and a third album books. Have you ever seen those?
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they're very popular. I read the one on In Utero, the Nirvana record, and they were in a spot where none of the mixes were sounding correct at all, and I think you can actually go back and listen to some of those older mixes before the album came out. It's kind of night and day, because I think we were at that point as well where we were under the impression that putting more stuff in is better and it's going to make it sound bigger and louder, which I don't think is the case anymore. Obviously, we were very young, didn't really know any better. So the person mixing really had a little bit of a tough time, and we wanted it to sound really brash and ballsy. We wanted the guitars to sound loud in the mix, but I guess he was quite used to bringing the guitars down, there being quite a lot of vocal and drums and stuff like that, and it wasn't really working for this record. We found we were kind of just looking up, and we found that Vince Ratti had done some of our favorite records at the time. And he's gone on to do some amazing and really big records as well.
That's right. And
we got one mix back from him. It was like the light bulbs kind of went on over our heads. We were just kind of like, this is our guy. He totally gets it. He gets where we're coming from. It really helped that he'd worked with Mike Sapone previously, so they were able to communicate a little bit more, because obviously that's a big factor in how you want something to sound. And he nailed it. And yeah, it, like you said, Tom, it's so... the mixing process, I think, is one of the most important and crucial aspects of making the record. And it was heartbreaking to get mixes back that weren't what we had imagined in our heads, So yeah, definitely.
Mike, that's such a great point. First of all, huge fans of Vince and his work. We've worked with him many times with Wonder Years and he's just he's built something so incredible, and he's a joy to work with. So I love that that the record ended up with that, and then he was able to bring it home for y'all. It's a really perfect example of something that we talk about a little bit on this show, but it's finding the right people, that understand, that intuitively see the vision in a similar path. And just because, someone might see one vision, and we talk about this a lot, in songwriting as a band too, there might be two juxtaposing ideas, of how you want something to sound, or maybe three or whatever it is. And early on, I think you're in the trenches and you're kind of fighting it out, and you feel like, oh, well, like this is the best way. Right. And I think the older we've gotten, and the more I've talked to a lot of other bands that have gone through all of these processes and evolutions, it's less about that and more about realizing you're really just deciding on one version collectively with everybody that's involved. And there are multiple paths that a song can take, a mix can take, and still be incredible. Right.
Yeah.
And what Vince was able to do, maybe it was because of the time that he had spent working with Sapone back and forth and things like that. His intuition was just closer to, I think, what y'all maybe weren't even sure, how to articulate what you wanted, but it was closer and it felt like the right fit. And I love that that's how this kind of wound up for you guys, because it's a great example.
There's some artists now, I'm thinking Peter Gabriel on his new releases, where he's actually sending it to multiple mix engineers, releasing multiple different mix engineered versions. And like, it's like not an A, B, C, D side. It's just like, here's the different interpretations.
Wow.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. It's such a like, just to speak to that aspect of things where like nothing's right nor wrong. It's just going back to that intent and the interpretation of intent. Yeah. So I love that.
Well, and it also goes, a long way. This is, less maybe for bands like ours, Mike, but in general, many years, even like, earlier, like 70s, 80s, 90s, it like labels would also like kind of have different mixes, like radio mixes versus, whatever, like it would bring in different engineers to kind of nudge the track in one direction or the other, you know what I mean? And now I'm sure some bands were either like, okay, cool, whatever, would either take it or would push back vehemently, right? It's a little bit less common now, in the punk lane, but it kind of is similar. And there's a reason that they, that they do that, because they know that this mix engineer intuitively will think about a song in this kind of light, and this mix engineer will intuitively push a song a little bit further this way. And everybody has their own brand and their own kind of subtle stamp about their philosophy behind, getting things like that and their own vision for stuff. And I think this is, a really great testament to finding the right team and knowing when you have the right team. And then saying, hey, let's see if somebody else just like gets something intuitively about this a little bit earlier. Kind of like how you're, not afraid to just hit the delete button and start over. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
And this is like all the way through until that record's done, recalls, mix notes, even mastering, like, hey, we love what you're doing here, but like, it feels a little too crushed, or it feels a little dark, or it feels a little bright. You know what I mean? Like, that happens all the way to the end. And I love, especially if for anybody that hasn't listened to this album, like, go listen to it. And it's like, it feels again, like it was like, this is what you meant to do with it the whole time. And that's kind of what you're chasing. And I love that it ended up with Vince, who we also, we had back in season 3, Tom, or 2,
yeah.
Season 2. Yeah.
2.
So we love him, dude. That's amazing. Mike, this has been such a cool conversation and like a walk back through. And I feel like I know even more and get where so much about this record came from. Is there anything else that you remember before we wrap it up? Cause you've shared a lot here.
I think, no, I think that's about everything. I thank you guys so much.
Of course. So with all of that now at hand and having just kind of walked back through that, talk to us about where you're at now. So you're writing, and like you said, each record kind of, you learn, you grow as a guitar player, as a songwriter, as a band member, right? You learn stuff about your band as it goes. How is writing these days different for you? Maybe if I think, if I'm not mistaken, as we speak, right, you're doing a good bit of writing right now. So how does that process change from what it looked like back on this record?
It feels like it's gotten a lot easier. Like, there was a period kind of like end of last year where I just felt like I had like the most crippling writer's block and I guess like imposter syndrome that I've kind of, because I'm, self-taught in every aspect of what I'm doing here. This wasn't like my first job, I guess. So yeah, like, I guess trying to overcome all of those obstacles and then realize, I guess, that I wasn't having any fun or I wasn't writing stuff that I really loved. Overcoming that was absolutely, so difficult. But when I got to the end of it, I felt so blissful in just sitting here again. I felt fresh again. I felt almost like I did back when we recorded this record. I feel excited to write new music. I'm trying to use less stuff and trying to make every single aspect of the song like the best part that it can be. And yeah, I feel like I've gotten a lot better, I guess, producing music as well myself. The demos, you know, and I'm just, I guess, trying to be better at my craft. And yeah, really excited to get down to the studio and record it.
Amazing.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to hear it. We're excited to hear it. This has been a pleasure. Thanks, Mike. Give the rest of the lads our best. And we're excited to see what Boston Manor has in store for us next. But this has been great. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you so much. Cheers, Casey. And thank you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So if you're listening to this, you're probably aware that creatives are notorious for being their own worst critics. And in an effort to make progress creatively and professionally by outlining goals or drawing up a roadmap for yourself or your band, you can easily fall into the trap of setting unrealistic expectations for yourself, right? Statistically speaking, humans drastically overestimate what can be accomplished in the short term and underestimate where they can land in the long term. And in doing this, we tend to gloss over that messy middle ground, the moments where failure, frustration, reflection, and ultimately reframing play a crucial role in shaping the outcomes we seek. When we lay out a timeline for writing, recording, or self-discovery, we rarely map out the space necessary for failure. And instead, we hold ourselves to a higher standard of perfection than that of which we judge most others around us by. And I think this is why I loved Mike talking about coming home from tour and just highlighting a folder and pressing delete, because he knew it was okay. And I think that the boldest artists are the ones brave enough to summon the patience necessary to abandon a dead end, clear the slate, and to believe in their own abilities to begin again, and to see the strategic quitting of something as a potential positive. But with only one episode left on season 5, please don't quit on us now. We'll catch you right back here next week on
The Record Process.